Hello, and welcome to the inaugural edition of ATXM News. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Lee Boy.
We're both musicians working for musicians through Austin, Texas Musicians nonprofit, serving the Central Texas music community on city, state, and federal policy, and providing basic needs and services that improve our quality of life.
So much of our advocacy work involves education. By keeping our music community up to date with the latest information that affects them, sometimes there's just too much to share with a simple social post or newsletter, and that's why we got together to create a 30-minute news program tailored just for Central Texas musicians.
That's right. Each show will dig deep into policy projects, community news, musical education, and a little bit of inspiration too, as we highlight the people and partners who help make a difference in our lives.
As we say here at Austin, Texas Musicians, we want you to show up, speak up, and be heard. And we hope ATXM News will help to make your own informed decisions about the issues that you care about.
First up tonight, we're going to take a look at the Live Music Fund. You may have heard of this unique new city program, and you may even have questions about how you may be able to help participate. Let's take a look. The Live Music Fund. It's a topic that has generated excitement, hope, and frustration amongst our music community since it first came to be. Drawing from hotel occupancy taxes, the LMF is considered to be the first ever sustainable public funding for the local music industry in the U.S. It's taken a lot of blood, sweat, and tears from a lot of people to get where we are now, and musicians are still waiting for the funds to get out the door. Before it was called the Live Music Fund, it was an idea. Austin's Visitor Impact Task Force met in 2017 to discuss ways to pull a portion of the hotel occupancy taxes to reinvest in our music industry. The plan for this fund was created, and in 2019, as our Austin, Texas Musicians nonprofit was first forming, we showed up in force at Tourism Commission, Music Commission, and City Council meetings to make our simple argument. Austin's robust tourism industry and resulting economy has been built on the backs of musicians, and yet we have not benefited from this boon to the live music capital of the world. Council agreed and passed item 29 on May 23rd of 2019. Use of these monies would be made possible through State Article 351 by unlocking funding for cultural arts through convention center expansion. While some were opposed to the expansion, ATXM went on record in support of this item.
We felt at the time that this was the first and possibly only chance to get some real financial support for music. So we mobilized our membership to show up in force at the polls and voted to get this thing on the table. And honestly, at this point, we couldn't care less about convention center expansion, as long as we have this money for musicians now and in the future.
Now, many are asking, how is the Live Music Fund going to work? And that's still a big question. In 2020, Music Commission appointed a Live Music Fund task force, which completed their guideline recommendations and submitted them to Council in the fall of that year. In early 2021, Austin's Economic Development Department proposed a new set of guidelines to Music Commission, who created another task force to review guidelines with a framework that emphasized equity as a top priority. Unfortunately, after months of meetings and negotiations between music community stakeholders, City Legal reported that equity requirements would not be allowed due to existing state law surrounding this specific public funding. So what's next? Austin Economic Development Department has proposed that funds will finally go out to the music community in 2023. The Live Music Fund is a complicated issue. It has the most potential to really make a positive, sustainable impact on our music community, which is why it's taking time to get it right. On the same token, it takes a while to fully tell the story of the historic public fund. In our next episode, we'll focus on guidelines. What do Austin musicians want? Who will it benefit, and who will manage the fund? We'll give you the facts and hear from more people involved in our next episode.
Thanks, Jessica. Coming up next, learn about efforts to restore and revitalize a historic venue and community space in East Austin. We'll tell you about the Doris Miller Auditorium Revitalization Project, next on ATXM News. With rampant real estate development and one of the highest cost of living rates anywhere in the U.S., Austin musicians are experiencing a serious shortfall in available creative spaces. Rehearsal, recording, and performance options, once plentiful in the live music capital of the world, have been paved under to make way for new high-rise luxury condos, retail showrooms, and big box development. In 2018, voters approved a $12 million Creative Spaces bond to help begin to address these shortcomings. That funding is currently in play under the newly creative Austin Economic Development Corporation, and we'll dig in deeper on this subject in our next episode. Today, we'd like to focus on one East Austin project that is gaining traction to make a real difference for musicians. According to Austin Parks Foundation, the Auditorium was constructed in 1942 by the Civilian Conservation Corps for the recreation needs of the armed forces. The facility is named after Doris Miller, a hero at Pearl Harbor and the first African-American recipient of the Navy's highest honor, the Navy Cross. The building hosted Black World War II servicemen from various bases who came to attend dances and see entertainment organized by the park staff in collaboration with the USO. It also became a stop on the Chitlin Circuit, where African-American musicians passing through Texas could play, including Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, Louis Armstrong, and Little Richard.
Notes for Notes operates studios all over the U.S., giving youth a chance to learn music business skills that will help them start a career in the industry. We've been here at Doris Miller for 5 years now, and even though we have a great stage here in our small studio, we have the opportunity to host real concerts out in the main auditorium stage. The only problem is we need some major upgrades. Sound, lighting, acoustics. We want to get this place back up to standard so that hip-hop and other underserved musical genres have a home here in Austin.
In 2020, Austin, Texas musicians began working on a proposal to bring some much-needed funding to Doris Miller in an effort to restore this historic venue to its former glory and to create a viable music hub for the East Austin community.
This year, Notes for Notes and Austin, Texas musicians managed to get a $35,000 grant from Austin Parks Foundation. Thank you. This is going to go a long way in helping us get started.
That grant became a springboard for deeper involvement from the City of Austin Parks Department, who visited Doris Miller in August to consider a comprehensive revitalization plan. That work is ongoing, and ATXM News will continue to bring you updates as the project unfolds.
Thanks, Lee. When we come back, we'll learn about a very musical effort to register voters in Texas border cities. Next on ATXM News.
Hi guys, Sarah Hall here with ATXM News. This September, the ATXM Votes team went on the road to register voters in Texas counties with the lowest voter registration rates. When our advocacy faced federal and state voting issues, it felt like preaching to the choir in Travis County, which very proudly boasts a 97% registration of eligible voters. So we asked ourselves where our energy and resources could be used best to help not only musicians in our own Austin community, but the network of thriving music communities all across the state, ahead of the 2022 midterm elections. We singled out the 3 counties with the lowest voter registration in the state and got to work pulling musical events together in El Paso, Laredo, and McAllen. It's not a coincidence that all these areas with the lowest political engagement are on the border, nor is it a coincidence that there are bright and resilient music communities in these areas that are facing the same issues as we are in Austin: the struggle to earn a living wage, nearly no support from their local governments, and an aching need for better policy geared towards the health of their artistic communities.
Well, one of the most important markers in general of like a society and where they are within like that whole like evolution is when you're able to support like an artisan class. So what musicians do is that they reflect the state of the world, and they're also a way of chronicling what's been going on. But if you don't have a true artisan class, what ends up happening is that all of that gets lost. And right now we don't really have that here in El Paso. And I think it's incredibly important because when we're an actual voting bloc, we're a constituency as well, and we're so ignored so often. But by voting, especially us as musicians, a lot of times we don't. But we don't understand that we have power in our numbers. And when we unite together, we can get these things changed.
We were incredibly lucky to get support from and make connections with organizations in each city, such as Planned Parenthood, Texas Rising, and local state reps. As well, we had the opportunity to introduce a lot of these groups to each other for the first time. Hearing these voting and advocacy groups talk about organizing future events for voting in their community together represents a bright outlook for the future of the democratic process in these counties.
Studies have shown there's really 2 reasons why people don't vote. They either don't know or they've never been asked.
There are so many things that are going on in the state of Texas and nationally that affect us. And when we're talking about immigration, when we're talking about women's right to choose, we're talking about voting rights, it's public education. Again, going back to so many issues to talk about, that it is really important for people to vote and to elect leaders that who they believe are going to do a good job in that position.
Exercising our right to vote is incredibly vital to the survival of our music communities. Austin musicians have been proudly demonstrating that more and more. And we found that supporting others doing this incredible work across the state in their own communities lifts us all up together. In our next episode, we'll start to look forward to 2024 and our ATXM Votes team's plans to amplify the voices of musicians and our communities even further in this next election cycle, as well as give updates on local policies brewing that you should pay attention to. This is Sarah Hall with ATXM News. Jessica, Lee, back to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Next up, a Music Commission report from Commissioner Scott Strickland. Stay tuned for more ATXM news.
So, boards and commissions. There are different appointees for every single council district in every single city. And what those board representatives do is they talk to their constituents within their districts and they recommend to their council members what their constituents actually want to see. The Music Commission is no different than that. And so basically, me as a music commissioner and 9 other music commissioners, we talk to our constituents and figure out what it is that's bothering us, what troubles we're having, what are we succeeding in, and we try our best to basically recommend to City Council how to make lives better for musicians. So a perfect example of that is how the Music Commission voted to actually raise the city rate from $150 an hour to $200 an hour. Currently, what we're working on also is for a band entity to receive an additional $200 for the entire group on top of their loading in and loading out fees, and counting that as part of their fee for performing and playing music. Another example of that is a live music fund. What is a live music fund? Who gets it? How is it distributed? Over what time? How much money do they get? All of these recommendations are things that we recommend to City Council, to economic development, and that comes from us, and that comes from nonprofit entities similar to Austin, Texas Musicians and like Austin, Texas Musicians. So the Live Music Fund, who gets the money? How does it get divvied up? How much do they get? Is it a full-time musician or a part-time musician? Is it a covered band? Who knows? We basically make these recommendations to economic development that takes it to City Council. And basically how that works is musicians will, based on the recommendations that we've been seeing from nonprofits like Austin, Texas Musicians, musicians will start getting some of that money basically the first quarter of 23. What you can see from commissioners in the future is more community engagement from our constituents, from the music commissioners as a whole. What you can see from music commissioners is actually getting basically to the nitty-gritty of how music works in this town. We know that music is not working for everyone. We know that being a performer in this town is not working for a whole lot of people anymore, just because of what we've already talked about. The big box developments, the real estate costs, inflation, you name it. It doesn't matter. It's not working for musicians anymore. And so basically, music commissioners, what we're trying to do is, and what we're going to do, is try and make life easier for musicians in this city by taking our recommendations and the things that you all are telling us to council. That's what we do. Being a music commissioner has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. Never before did I ever think I would actually be sitting on a dais and talking to different people and listening to complaints and all these other things, but it's been a very, very good experience. And one thing that I take with me a lot is learning from you, learning from people that want to know more about, how to be a professional musician, how to succeed and climb up the ladder or break out, or staying where you're at and being comfortable with that. How is it that you can survive as a full-time musician in this city? My opinion, it's not really about breaking out. It's not really about trying to, get that Grammy or that, or sell out, a stadium. You can make it where you are, and our job is to help you get there.
Thanks so much, Scott. We look forward to your next report.
Next up, we'll take a look at some of the big music community events coming up. And we'll hear from Austin, Texas Musicians CEO Pat Bukta to learn more about what's ahead for 2023. We're joined today by ATXM CEO Pat Bukta to tell us a little bit more about how we got here and what's next. Welcome, Pat.
Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah.
It's great to be here.
So, how did we get here?
Well, great question. Austin, Texas Musicians was originally started in 2008 by our co-founder, Nikia Reynoso, as a private Facebook group for musicians to swap and sell gear, find bandmates, and share inside info on venues and industry tips. And as the cost of living in Austin continued to grow over those years, a need for action became apparent, and in 2019, we incorporated as a 501c4 nonprofit.
All right. For those of us who don't know what a 5014c4 for whatever that is, what is that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So that's specifically a nonprofit that's able to lobby and engage in political action. And although technically we can endorse political candidates, and believe me, we get asked for endorsements all the time, we like to say that we support causes, not candidates. Now, if a candidate supports a cause we care about, we'll educate musicians about their position so that our community can make their own choices at the polls.
Okay. You mentioned ATXM formed in 2019. After the last few years we've had, that seems like a lifetime ago. How has ATXM been helping in those years?
Well, our first major project was to lobby the city for a portion of hotel occupancy taxes to be invested in our music community. And we helped get musicians out to vote on this thing in 2019, and the Live Music Fund that you covered earlier was born. We started in 2020 by electing our Musicians Advisory Panel, made up of musicians from every diverse community and council district, who would go on to work on a number of projects for our community. And of course, as we know, 2020 had different plans for all of us. And when the pandemic hit, we worked with city officials to help secure a total of $6 million in federal relief funds for musicians and $5 million for venues. Additionally, we formed key partnerships with the Texas Workforce Commission and Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts to help over 100 musicians receive their unemployment benefits. We enjoy an ongoing partnership with Workforce Solutions to create new job opportunities, job fairs, and weekly job lists just for our musicians. We have a great partnership with the Trail Conservancy, amongst others, to provide over $100,000 in paid performance opportunities to our members. And we've worked to bring a $35,000 grant that Lee mentioned earlier from the Austin Parks Foundation to the historic Doris Auditorium, where we are right now. And to date, we've registered almost 2,000 new voters across Texas, both here in Travis County and with our Músicos, Unidos para Votar campaign that Sarah mentioned earlier. And, these are just some of the highlights. It's been a very busy few years.
Yes. You've said before that musicians give as much as they get. What are some examples of that?
Well, as we know, in 2021, we had a winter storm that left many in our state without power or water for weeks. Towards the end of that first week, I got a call from Councilman Natasha Harper Madison, who let me know that she had tons of food and water coming in the next morning and no one to help distribute it. At 7 a.m. the next morning, with the help of Amplified Sound Coalition, Texas Music Workforce Commission, and Dawa Heals, we assembled over 100 unemployed musicians, event and venue workers on site at the Millennium Youth and Entertainment Complex. And over the course of that next week, 500 of us in total were able to serve food and water to 10,000 Central Texans in need. As well, we hosted vaccination drives to serve 500 COVID vaccinations to our community. We musicians are a caring and generous community, and we're always ready to step up and serve.
So what's next for ATXM?
Well, I think the number one issue facing musicians in Central Texas is affordability. We've got to figure this out and soon. Okay, we're working closely with city officials and the Austin Economic Development Corporation and developers to create new housing opportunities. It's an uphill battle, but we've got to do it if we want to continue to live and work here. Number two, rampant development has left us without creative spaces to rehearse, record, and perform in. And projects like Doris Miller here will create those opportunities. And we're working closely with the AEDC's Cultural Trust to develop more of these spaces. As Lee mentioned earlier, we always like to say, show up, speak up, and be heard, because we know that musicians make up the largest political bloc in this city and likely statewide as well. We're already strategizing on how we can empower even more musicians all across Texas to get registered and vote in 2024. Our big vision is to expand statewide and eventually across the country so that all musicians have a voice in politics. This template works in every music city, and we've already enjoyed working with New Orleans and El Paso to create new avenues of advocacy for musicians. On a personal note, I'm so humbled to be able to serve our music community through this work. I'm grateful to all of the countless partners who have helped us along the way, and especially to our Musicians Advisory Panel members like y'all who worked so hard to educate and advocate for us. And I cannot wait for what's next.
Well, Pat, from all of us musicians in Austin, I must say we really appreciate all the work you do, and you're changing the city of Austin's music scene. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. With that, our first episode of ATXM News comes to a close.
We hope that you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've learned a little bit more about what makes Austin music community so great. We're unique in the sense that we have more support here for musicians than most anywhere else in the U.S. But we also face some unique challenges that makes it difficult to live and work here as a musician.
Austin, Texas Musicians is committed to serving our music community through advocacy, education, and a little bit of inspiration along the way, so that musicians have a better quality of life within the live music capital of the world. We hope you'll join us on this journey. See you next time. Bye, guys.